Alice and her son Lucas walked up the steps to their cozy home, the sun setting gently over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the sidewalk. Carrying her shopping bags, she felt the familiar comfort of being back home. With the keys in hand, Alice juggled, trying to find the right one, while Lucas, always impatient, grabbed the door handle and turned it, hoping it was locked, as usual. To his surprise, the door opened easily. Alice furrowed her eyebrows in confusion. "Strange," she muttered to herself, thinking that Miguel, her husband, should have come home earlier. After placing her groceries on the kitchen counter, Alice decided she deserved a few moments to relax in the living room before starting to prepare dinner. However, upon entering the room, his steps faltered. There, on the couch, was Miguel, but he wasn't alone. Beside him, a woman Alice had never seen before laughed softly, as if they shared an intimate secret. Alice's heart raced, and her mind began to spin. "Excuse me," he managed, his voice firm despite the shock. "What's going on here?" The unknown woman looked up, an amused smile on her lips, but there was an arrogance about it that Alice didn't like. Miguel, however, remained seated, his expression unreadable. A storm of emotions was brewing inside Alice, her heart beating wildly as she desperately waited for an explanation. Finally, Miguel stood up, his face now serious. "Alice, this is my girlfriend Mariana. Mariana, this is my soon-to-be ex-wife, Alice," he said, with a calm devoid of any emotion. Alice's mind was spinning, unable to fully comprehend what was happening. "Wait, I don't understand," she began, her voice shaking with disbelief and pain. "Did you bring your girlfriend to our house?" Miguel interrupted sharply. "My house, Alice. It's my house. And look, I tried to make our marriage work, but I clearly failed. We have to move on." His words hit her like a physical blow, and the shock of his betrayal was devastating, as painful as losing a loved one. Alice stood frozen, her eyes fixed on Miguel, as he introduced Mariana with a casualness that hurt her deeply. "How long has this been going on?" she managed to ask, her voice a mixture of anger and sadness. Miguel sighed heavily, his expression souring as he faced Alice's questioning. "Alice, this is not the time or place to discuss this," he said, trying to end the conversation dismissively. "Who is she? And how can you just stand there?" Alice insisted, her voice wavering with emotion. Mariana opened her mouth to respond, but Miguel interrupted her. He turned to Mariana, his hands holding her waist as he stared at Alice. "Alice, you had your chance. You didn't meet my expectations," he stated bluntly. "Mariana can give me what I need." The harshness of his words was like a slap to Alice's face, leaving her reeling from the cold rejection, as if the years together meant nothing. "I don't understand, Miguel. After all these years together, how can you say that?" "What am I supposed to say to Lucas?" Alice asked, her voice shaky on the verge of tears. Miguel's response was cold and dismissive. "Tell him what you think is best. I'm not his father, Alice. I never was, and he will never be my son." Alice stood there, sobbing softly, her head hanging in despair. She knew there was no going back. Without saying a word, she turned, took Lucas's hand, and went to the room they shared. "Go get your things, Lucas. We need to leave." "Where are we going, Mommy?" Lucas asked, trying to smile, but with tears in his eyes. Alice swallowed hard, avoiding her son's innocent gaze. "We'll be fine, honey. Just go get your things." As soon as she heard the soft click of the door closing, Alice fell to the floor. Everything seemed like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. She remembered how it all started, how difficult it was to believe in another love after the death of her first husband, how Miguel came into her life and brought with him the promise of happiness. She remembered their first date, when he made her laugh for the first time in a year and a half. His charm was undeniable, and the way he held her hand made her feel safe and at home again. But now, the man she believed loved her was here, holding another woman in his arms, laughing as if everything they had shared was a lie. Rachel sighed, her pain turning to bitter resentment. With a strength she didn't even know she had, she invaded the room, grabbed a suitcase, and started throwing Lucas's clothes inside, her hands shaking with anger and sadness. She couldn't believe that she had wasted so many years with Miguel's lies and deceit. As she packed her clothes, her mind raced with all the signs she'd ignored over the years. Anger and pain boiled over, manifesting in the fierce way she piled her clothes into her suitcase, as if she were trying to squeeze all the betrayal into each item. Just as he was about to zip the suitcase, a small voice interrupted his tumultuous thoughts. "Mommy?" Lucas's hesitant voice broke through her fury, and she turned to see her son standing in the doorway, a suitcase slung over his shoulder, and another beside him. "It's okay, baby. I'm ready." They left the house, and it took all of Alice's willpower not to look back. While driving through the city streets, Alice tried to remain calm, pointing to the other houses, trying to distract him. "Do you remember the house I told you your grandfather left us? That's where we're going." Lucas nodded, trying to be strong, but she saw the sadness in his eyes. When they finally arrived at the old house she had inherited, Alice knew it wasn't much, but it would be enough to start over. The house was bigger than it looked from the outside, but it was in terrible shape. Upon entering, Alice felt the weight of the task ahead. "Well, it looks like we have a lot of work to do," she said, trying to sound optimistic. Lucas nodded, still looking around, but with an expression of determination. "Let me check the attic to see what we can use there. There should be a vacuum cleaner somewhere." Alice watched him climb the stairs, her heart sinking at the thought that they were now alone. Shortly after, Lucas returned, and together they began cleaning the house from top to bottom. The dust and dirt disappeared, revealing the true beauty of the place. The wooden floor that was once dusty now sparkled, as did the windows. As they worked, the house began to transform from a gloomy place to a true home. Finally, after hours of hard work, they finished cleaning. Alice looked at her son and smiled. "You know, we make a great team," she said. But she soon noticed the tiredness in Lucas's eyes and knew they still had a long way to go. Determined to make that place a home, Alice remembered seeing some wooden planks in the yard and decided to use them as firewood. But when he tried to break them, he realized that it would be difficult. "Why don't we go see if we can get an axe from our neighbors?" she suggested, trying to keep her voice steady and hide her concern. Lucas walked her to the house next door, which seemed just as quiet as theirs. Alice knocked on the door, waiting for someone to answer. After a few moments, an elderly woman opened the door, a warm smile lighting up her face. "Can I help you, sweetie?" he asked gently. Alice explained the situation, and to her surprise, the woman invited them inside and warmed up. Inside the house, Alice felt the warmth of the fireplace and the comforting aroma of fresh bread. The woman, who introduced herself as Clara, offered them tea and hot chocolate. "I'm Alice, and this is my son Lucas," she said, still a little wary. Clara smiled, nodding her head. "I understand that you are careful, but you don't need to worry. I don't bite." Alice's cheeks flushed, but Clara seemed to understand her hesitation. As they talked, Alice began to relax, feeling an unexpected connection with this woman who, until recently, was a stranger. When Clara offered Alice and Lucas a room to spend the night, Alice hesitated, but ended up accepting. The night was cold, and she didn't want to subject Lucas to the discomfort of an empty house. Clara showed them 2 rooms next to each other, and Alice quickly got Lucas settled in before heading to her own room. But that night, she couldn't sleep. The tears finally fell, a mix of relief and sadness, as she silently thanked Clara for her kindness. The next morning, Alice met Gabriel, Clara's son, who was there to help with repairs to the house. Gabriel was tall, with hard features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. Initially, Alice mistook him for a handyman, but soon discovered he was a firefighter and the person who would take care of the repairs. Despite his somewhat harsh attitude, Alice realized that Gabriel was someone she could trust. When Clara offered Alice and Lucas a room to spend the night, Alice hesitated for a moment, still trying to process how quickly her life had changed. She had never liked depending on other people, but that night, something inside her broke. She knew she couldn't go back to the cold, empty house. And no matter how much he tried to keep up appearances, Lucas needed warmth and security, things that Clara's house seemed to have in abundance. I don't know if we should bother you like this, Alice began, but Clara interrupted with a gentle gesture. Why, it's no trouble at all. Believe me, darling, it's not safe for you to go back to that dark house tonight. It's warm and safe here, and tomorrow we can think about how to help you fix what needs to be done. Alice's resistance crumbled under Clara's gentle insistence. Okay, Alice said finally, feeling a wave of relief mixed with embarrassment at having to accept help from a stranger. Thank you, Clara. I really appreciate it. Clara smiled, satisfied, and led Alice and Lucas up the stairs to 2 adjoining rooms. Clara opened the door to one of the bedrooms, revealing a soft bed and a blanket that looked inviting. Alice watched Lucas slowly walk to the bed, still a little dazed by everything that had happened. He threw himself onto the bed, too exhausted to speak, and Alice pulled the blanket over him. Before she could say good night, Lucas was already asleep, his small body finally relaxing after the long, hard day. Alice turned to Clara, who was waiting patiently at the door. You're welcome to share a room with Lucas if you want, Clara said, her voice soft and understanding. I know how difficult it can be for a mother to sleep alone after a day like today. Alice smiled, feeling deep gratitude for this woman she barely knew. Thank you, Clara, she said, accepting the offer. I think I'll do it. The hours passed slowly as Alice tried to find some rest. She couldn't shake the thoughts that were pounding in her mind. Miguel's face, the cruel words he had said, and the overwhelming feeling of betrayal. When he finally fell asleep, tears rolled silently down his face, mixing gratitude for Clara with the shock and pain that Miguel had caused him. The next morning, Alice was awakened by the soft sounds of Clara working in the kitchen. Lucas was still sleeping soundly, so Alice quietly made her way downstairs, following the comforting scent of fresh coffee and baked bread. Upon entering the kitchen, he saw Clara at the window, looking out, with an expression that mixed nostalgia and tranquility. Good morning, said Alice, trying to sound more excited than she felt. Clara turned around, smiling. Good morning, darling. Sit down. I made coffee and fresh bread. I know it's not much, but it's a start. Alice thanked her and sat at the table, taking a sip of coffee and feeling the warmth of the drink fill some of the emptiness she felt. The tranquility of the morning contrasted with the internal turmoil she still faced. But there was something comforting in Clara's presence, who seemed to understand without needing many words. As they ate breakfast, Clara started talking about her son, Raphael, who was a firefighter and was coming to help with repairs to Alice's house. He's a good guy, Clara said, a gleam of pride in her eyes. He always liked helping others. I think he got that from his father. Alice smiled, trying to imagine what it would be like to meet Raphael. The last thing I wanted was to depend on anyone else, but I knew I couldn't do it all alone. I'm very grateful, Clara. I don't know what I would do without your help. Don't worry about it, dear. We all need help at some point in our lives. And today I'm the one here for you. Tomorrow, who knows? It could be you helping someone else. As they talked, Alice began to realize that Clara was more than just a helpful neighbor. There was a wisdom and kindness in her that went beyond immediate understanding. And as Clara talked about her life, Alice began to feel that perhaps this unexpected change had a greater purpose. Later that morning, as Clara prepared more bread and Alice helped set the table, a firm knock sounded on the door. Clara smiled, knowing exactly who it was. "It must be Raphael," she said, walking to the door to open it. Raphael entered, bringing with him a blast of cold winter air. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a serious expression, but his deep blue eyes softened when he saw his mother. "Good morning, Mom," he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. When his eyes fell on Alice, he studied her with a gaze that seemed to read her soul. "You must be Alice," he said, holding out his hand. "Nice to meet you. My mom spoke a lot about you." Alice squeezed his hand, feeling the strength and security that emanated from him. "Nice to meet you, Raphael. And thanks for coming to help." Raphael nodded. "Let's take a look at the house and see what needs to be done. Don't worry, we'll figure it out." As the three left and walked to Alice's house, Raphael began to inspect the place with a critical eye. He noticed the small repairs that needed to be done, like the broken shingles on the roof and the clogged gutter, but he also noticed something Alice hadn't noticed: a quiet strength and resilience in the very structure of the house. "This house has character," said Raphael with a hint of admiration in his voice. "It's like I've been waiting for you." Alice looked at the house with new eyes. It was old, yes, but there was something special about it, something she hadn't been able to notice before. It was as if, somehow, the house was keeping a secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Raphael got to work immediately, cleaning the gutters and repairing the shingles. Alice tried to help, but he insisted that she rest and leave the heavy lifting to him. While he worked, Clara and Alice talked in the kitchen, exchanging stories and recipes, and little by little, Alice began to feel that this place could really be a home. By the end of the day, the house was starting to look different. Raphael's repairs made a noticeable difference, and the atmosphere in the house began to change. The cold that previously seemed to permeate every wall was replaced by a feeling of warmth and welcome. When Raphael finished his work, he returned to Clara's house with Alice and Lucas, where they were welcomed by a warm and comforting dinner. During dinner, Lucas, who had been shy at first, began to open up, telling Raphael about his toys and his adventures at school. Raphael listened attentively, and Alice noticed the ease with which he connected with his son. There was a gentleness about Raphael that surprised her, and as she watched him interact with Lucas, she realized that he was very different from Miguel. Miguel has always been distant with Lucas, treating him more like a nuisance than a child with needs and feelings. Raphael, on the other hand, seemed genuinely interested in everything Lucas had to say, as if every word was important. This difference made Alice feel both grateful and sad. Grateful to have found people like Clara and Raphael, but sad to realize how much she and Lucas had lost alongside Miguel. As the night progressed, Alice began to relax, feeling more at peace than at any time since everything had changed. She knew she still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she could find a way to move forward. There was something about Raphael. Maybe it was his calming presence, or maybe it was the simple fact that he was there, helping without expecting anything in return, that made her feel like she wasn't alone. In the days that followed, Raphael continued to help with the repairs, and Alice began to feel that something was changing within her. The trauma and pain that Miguel had caused her began to be replaced by a sense of hope. And the more time she spent with Raphael, the more she felt attracted to him. It wasn't just a physical attraction, although she couldn't deny that he was an attractive man. It was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. While working on the house together, Alice and Raphael began to share more about their lives. She told him about the death of her first husband, about how she had struggled to move on, and about how Miguel had come into her life at a vulnerable time. Raphael listened attentively, without judging, just offering a friendly shoulder. And as she spoke, Alice found herself opening up in a way she hadn't in years. Raphael in turn told Alice about his life as a firefighter, about the things he had seen and experienced, and about how his father's death had changed his life forever. He spoke about the responsibility of caring for his mother and how, despite everything, he always found strength in helping others. As he spoke, Alice saw in Raphael a kindred spirit, someone who had experienced deep pain, but who still found strength and purpose in helping others. One night after a long day of work, Raphael and Alice were sitting on the porch of Clara's house, watching the stars. Lucas was already asleep, and Clara had retired to her room, leaving the two alone. The silence between them was comfortable, as if they didn't need words to understand each other. "I know it's still early," Raphael said, finally breaking the silence. "But I feel like there's something between us." "Alice, something that goes beyond anything I've ever experienced." Alice felt her heart race, but at the same time, there was a peace in his words. She knew that she also felt something for Raphael, something that grew every day. "I feel the same way, Raphael," she said, turning to look into his eyes. "But I'm still trying to understand everything that happened. I don't want to rush it." Raphael nodded, understanding perfectly. "I don't want to pressure you, Alice. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, however long you need." Alice smiled, feeling a surge of emotion. "Thank you, Raphael. I'm here for you too." That night, under the soft glow of the stars, something changed between them. It wasn't a rushed or impetuous romance, but something built on trust, respect, and a deep understanding. They knew they still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, Alice felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The days turned into weeks, and the relationship between Alice and Raphael blossomed. They not only shared the work of rebuilding the house, but also the little moments of everyday life. Breakfast in Clara's kitchen, conversations under the stars, and the laughs shared while watching Lucas play in the yard. Every moment together was a slow, steady build to something deeper. Lucas also flourished under the warmth and security of his new surroundings. He and Raphael formed a strong bond, and Alice watched with joy as their relationship grew. Lucas, who had seemed so lost and confused before, was now full of energy and curiosity. He finally had someone who not only listened to him, but also understood and appreciated him. Then one day, while Alice was in the attic, cleaning and organizing things, she found something that would change her life forever. It was an old suitcase, covered in dust, that was hidden in a corner. Opening it, she found a series of carefully organized files and an envelope addressed to her. His heart sank when he recognized his father's handwriting. With trembling fingers, Alice unfolded the letter and began to read. Her father's words, written so many years ago, seemed to reach across time and space to reach her at that moment. He talked about how he always wanted to give her more than he was capable of throughout his life, and how he had made small investments, hoping that one day it would help her. Alice couldn't hold back her tears as she read. Her father, who had always fought so hard to care for her, had left a legacy that now, years after his death, was about to change everything. At the end of the letter was a phone number and instructions to contact a Mr. Thompson, who would help her access these investments. With her heart racing, Alice called the number, and what she heard left her speechless. She was a millionaire, thanks to her father's investments. Alice could hardly believe what she had just heard. Mr. Thompson's words still echoed in her mind. She was a millionaire. It was hard to process, especially after the last few months of uncertainty and grief. For a moment, she sat in the attic, the envelope still in her hands, as tears ran freely down her face. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, but also of deep emotion, a mix of happiness and sadness, knowing that her father, even after his death, continued to care for her. After a few minutes, Alice pulled herself together and ran down the stairs. She needed to tell Raphael. I needed to share this news that, suddenly, changed everything. As she descended, her mind began to think of all the ways this money could help. Not just her and Lucas, but so many other people. She thought of Clara, who had taken her in when she needed it most, and of Raphael, who had become a vital part of her life and her son's life. When he arrived in the living room, he found Raphael and Clara in the kitchen, talking quietly while they prepared dinner. The sight of them together, laughing and working in harmony, warmed his heart. For a moment, she stood in the doorway, just watching them, feeling more connected to these two people than she had ever imagined. "Raphael," she called, her voice a little shaky with emotion. He turned to look at her, immediately noticing something was different. "Are you okay, Alice?" he asked, his tone concerned as he noticed the expression on your face. I need to tell you something," she said, her voice still unsteady. "You won't believe what I just found out." Raphael and Clara exchanged a brief look before following Alice into the living room, where she sat on the sofa, still holding the envelope with her father's letter. She explained everything to them: the letter, her father's investments, and the fact that she was now a millionaire. As she spoke, the incredulity on Raphael and Clara's faces was replaced by silent, contained joy. "That's amazing, Alice," Raphael said finally, after she finished speaking. "I can hardly believe it. This changes everything, doesn't it?" Alice nodded, still feeling the weight of what this new reality meant. "Yes, it changes everything. But the most important thing is that now we can do much more than just survive. We can help other people. We can start over." Clara smiled, her eyes shining with excitement. "Your father was a wise man, Alice. He knew this time would come, and he prepared everything to make sure you had what you needed when the time was right." Alice held Clara and Raphael's hands, feeling the deep connection they shared. "I want to help you too," she said, determined. "You have been my anchor through this difficult time, and I want to give back." Raphael shook his head, smiling softly. "Alice, you don't owe us anything. We helped because we wanted to, because we care about you and Lucas. But if there's something you really want to do, we're here for it." They spent the rest of the night discussing plans, ideas, and dreams. Alice decided that the first thing to do would be to renovate the house she had inherited, turning it into a home for her and Lucas. Raphael offered to help with the renovation, ensuring that everything was done with care and attention. Clara, in turn, was already thinking about how she could contribute, suggesting ways to improve the garden and bring more life to the environment. In the days that followed, Alice began taking the necessary steps to access the funds left by her father. With Mr. Thompson's help, she was able to transfer the money to an account in her name and began making preparations to renovate the house. It was a long process, but with each step, Alice felt like she was moving in the right direction. As the weeks passed, Alice's house began to transform. Raphael worked tirelessly, repairing the walls, replacing the roof, and restoring the wooden floors that had lost their shine over the years. Clara and Lucas helped as much as they could, painting walls and planting flowers in the garden. Alice was involved in every detail, feeling more connected to that house than ever before. And as the house took shape, something even deeper began to happen. The relationship between Alice and Raphael grew stronger every day. It wasn't just working together that brought them closer. but the way they began to depend on each other for emotional support and to face challenges as they arose. Raphael was always by Alice's side, offering a friendly shoulder when she needed it, and sharing his own fears and hopes with her. One evening, after a long day of work, Alice and Raphael were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was fresh and filled with the scent of the flowers that Clara and Lucas had planted. "Have you thought about what you're going to do after the house is ready?" Raphael asked, breaking the silence. Alice smiled, thinking about the possibilities that the future now offered. "I have some ideas," she said. "I want to write again. I had stopped, but I feel like now I can finally focus on it." Raphael nodded, respect for her evident in his eyes. "You have so much talent, Alice. It would be a shame not to share it with the world." "I also want to help other people," she continued. "Maybe create a space here in the house to offer support to other women who have gone through difficult situations. Like a refuge, where they can feel safe and rebuild their lives, just like I am doing." Raphael looked at her with admiration. "That's a wonderful idea, Alice. You have a big heart. I know it will make a difference in many people's lives." Alice felt a rush of emotion upon hearing his words. "I wouldn't have gotten this far without you and Clara, Raphael. You're my family now." He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it affectionately. "And we will always be here for you, Alice. Always." Time continued to pass, and the renovation of the house was finally completed. The place, which had previously seemed gloomy and abandoned, was now full of life and warmth. Each room had been transformed, reflecting the love and care that had been invested into it. The garden was blooming, and the house was filled with natural light that came in through the large, clean windows. On the day the renovation was officially completed, Alice organized a small dinner to celebrate with Clara, Raphael, and Lucas. As they sat at the table, surrounded by the welcoming environment they had created together, Alice realized how much her life had changed since the day she arrived there. Clara raised her wineglass and made a toast. "To new beginnings," she said, smiling at everyone around the table. "May this home be a place of love, peace, and happiness for us all." "To new beginnings," repeated everyone, raising their glasses and toasting. That night, after everyone had retired, Alice and Raphael sat on the sofa, the fire crackling softly in the fireplace. The house was peaceful, and the silence was comfortable, a testament to the peace that now filled their hearts. Raphael turned to Alice, holding her hand. "Alice, I need to tell you something," he began, his voice low and serious. "I don't know how to say this, but I love you." Alice looked at him, her heart beating faster. She had known in her heart that she loved him too, but hearing those words from Raphael, everything seemed to finally fall into place. "I love you too, Raphael," she replied, feeling a deep joy take over her being. "You helped me find my way back. You showed me that it is possible to love and be loved again." They moved closer, their lips meeting in a soft, promise-filled kiss. It was the beginning of something new, something built on trust, respect, and a deep love. They knew that the future would still bring challenges, but they also knew that they would be together to face them. In the months that followed, Alice began to turn her plans into reality. With the help of Raphael and Clara, she created a small refuge in the house where other women could find shelter and support. The space soon became a place of hope, where stories of pain turned into stories of overcoming. Lucas flourished more and more in his new home, and his bond with Raphael grew stronger every day. For Alice, seeing her son happy and safe was the greatest reward of all. She knew she had found not just a house, but a home, where she and Lucas could grow and thrive. Alice also returned to writing, finding in words a way to express everything she had lived and learned. Her books began to gain recognition, and she soon became a respected author whose stories inspired others to find strength and hope in difficult times. Time passed, and life in the small house settled into a peaceful, happy rhythm. Alice, Raphael, Lucas, and Clara formed a united family who faced challenges together and celebrated the joys of everyday life. The love that had grown between Alice and Raphael only grew stronger, and they knew they were destined to spend the rest of their lives together. One sunny spring afternoon, as Alice walked through the garden alongside Raphael, she stopped for a moment to observe the flowers blooming around her. She turned to Raphael, smiling, and said, "I couldn't be happier. This is the home I always dreamed of having, and I'm so grateful to have you by my side." Raphael smiled back, holding your hand firmly. "Me too, Alice. You are my home, wherever you are, and I promise that I will always be here, for you and for Lucas, no matter what." They continued to walk through the garden, hand in hand, knowing that the future was bright and full of possibilities. Alice knew that she had found the happiness she had been searching for, and that now, finally, she was exactly where she was supposed to be, in a loving home, with the people who mattered most. And so, as the sun slowly set over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, Alice and Raphael began to dream together about the next chapters of their lives. They knew that, together, they could face anything, because they had found what really mattered: love, family, and the hope of a new beginning.